Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, a UK-based Star Wars podcast with in-depth discussions and analysis sprinkled with some silliness. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete.
And I am Jason Hondo Ling.
And we are back with a brand new episode of Star Wars covering all the latest Star Wars news snippets from the past few weeks. Obviously, the majority of the month we've been recording Andor reviews, and then we had a bit of a break last week. We are back to talk some news. Nothing too major, but some fun snippets. We'll dive straight in, and the first thing we're going to talk about is Rian Reynolds has revealed on an episode of the Box Office Podcast that he pitched the idea of an R-rated Star Wars property to Disney. Now, what he's saying is that it doesn't have to be overt A-plus characters. There's a wide range of characters you could use. And I don't mean R-rated to be vulgar. R-rated is a Trojan horse of emotion. I always wonder why studios don't want to just gamble on something like that. Said a few other things, but that's mainly the main thing. Let's just go over to you, Jason. So what's your thoughts on? I suppose two questions really. Let's deal with R-rated first. Like R-rated Star Wars. What's your thoughts? And then I suppose we'll ask about Rian Reynolds and Star Wars.
Yeah, with the R rating, obviously it's not quite the kiss of death that it used to be. It used to be, especially anything to do with Disney, you know, if it was R, they were staying away from R rated because it didn't fit with their sort of IP. But obviously, as time's gone by, there's been quite a few R rated films that have hit the box office. It's not been gratuitous in what it's contained. And it's just, you know, a classic example is what they've done with Deadpool. You know, the only way you could really do a Deadpool interpretation from what the comic books were was to go R-rated. And Ryan Reynolds has done that successfully. Obviously, you know, Star Wars is about war. It's not a pretty story. So an R-rated film would possibly, you know, fit with showing maybe the bits that you wouldn't see in other films. So I wouldn't have a problem with it. Obviously, it would then sort of tunnel. You'd miss out on the kids sort of thing until they were old enough to watch it. But it's, you know, if it was done right, I think it could be quite a successful thing.
I think for me, I wouldn't be like, this needs to be R-rated, let's make an R-rated movie. I think, like, if a project is naturally leading towards that type of rating, then, you know, then yeah, that's natural. But I think the things that make a movie R-rated, right, is number one is violence and gore and blood. So in Star Wars, we have laser blasts and lightsabers where typically, even though limbs get chopped off and people get shot, it usually leaves burn marks rather than loads of gushing blood and guts, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So straight away, the weapons and the utensils we use in the Star Wars galaxy are sort of lean against that, which is a good thing, just naturally. The other thing is swear words. Now, I know we've had some swear words in Andor, but typically Star Wars, the swear words are its own language. Like Karabast is a big swear word in Star Wars, but in English it doesn't mean anything, right? So I think, again, language-wise, you know, unless you're going to start inserting loads of English words into there, I think you have to be careful with that, because then it does start to lose its feel of being Star Wars, and it feels more like Earth-like, if that makes sense. And I think they walk that line very finely and well, I would say, in Andor, but when you go more than that, do you know what I mean? I think that's when it starts to feel less like a galaxy far, far away and more like a galaxy down the street, if that makes sense. And the other thing would be sort of nudity and sort of sexual, I think, scenes of a sexual nature, I suppose. Which, again, I think you can subtly tell those scenes without it being too hard of an R rating, if that makes sense, if you pardon the pun. What's your thoughts on that sort of stuff? Like, you know what I mean? To make it to go, we need it R rated. Would have to start having like blood and guts flying all over the place. So that would change the last 50 years of Star Wars almost. You know, we'll have to add way more swear words, which would change the last 50 years of Star Wars almost. And we're going to have to add loads of nudity and sex scenes probably. So when I put it that way, like, what's your thoughts on that? Or do you think I'm being too over the top?
Yeah, as I say, as long as it went with the story, I wouldn't have a problem. But like you say, there are very good reasons why, with Star Wars and the way the story's being told, it wouldn't fit in. So it would be purely dependent on the story and why it would need to be R rated. You know, if it was showing more overtly things that have previously been hidden, as long as it fits with the story and is a story in the start, that works, then fine. But like you say, for going for R rated for the sake of R rated, then no, it's not necessary.
No, definitely. And I think when Ryan talks about a Trojan horse of emotion, I think Star Wars is full of emotion, right? It's very tragic. um, Also full of hope as well, I suppose. All the emotions, very deep. Um, and you can tell that in a way without having to be over the top, in my opinion, as we've seen with the rise and fall of Anakin Skywalker, very tragic. The rise and fall of Ben Solo, very tragic. Um, you know, Han Solo's outcome, things like that. Do you know what I mean? Um, Obviously, Ryan's also said he'd want to produce and write or be part of behind the scenes. What he said is that, like, those kinds of IP don't really do well and sort of having big stars in front of them. Um, for me, Ryan Reynolds, I think he's obviously on fire at the minute. I think Deadpool's just got hotter, hotter, and hotter. And then obviously since the Fox acquisition by Disney, it allowed sort of Deadpool 3 to be Deadpool and Wolverine and tying to the MCU. And we don't know what's next for Deadpool. I imagine he's going to maybe turn up in Doomsday or be part of Secret Wars down the line, the next big Marvel Avengers adventures. Again, I think if he wants to write and produce a Star Wars project, I think again he'd have to pitch that. And if it's a good idea, they'll go with it. You know what I mean? But I'm not like desperate to have Ryan Reynolds in Star Wars or a part of behind the scenes. I think he's I respect him. And he's a funny guy and he's worked in Hollywood a long time, and he really is found his feet at the minute and doing some great stuff. Especially when you look at even his documentary he does with the Wrexham football team. Do you know what I mean? He's making some very good quality products out there. He's obviously in the Disney bubble now with what he's doing with Welcome to Wrexham and with Deadpool. So if he's got a good idea and he pitches it and it's a good idea and they green light it, then fair enough. But I'm not like we need to force him into a project. Is my opinion. What's your thoughts on Ryan Reynolds? Would you like to see him in front of the camera, behind the camera, nowhere near anything? What's your thoughts?
He's one of those characters that he's good at what he does, but it depends on what he's doing and how he's doing it. He could easily. There's so many characters that he could potentially play that would, he'd fit quite nicely to, because he is quite a versatile actor, and obviously he's very good at the comedy style of action. So yeah, he's again. I could see him as a smuggler. I could see him as a bounty hunter. And I think, you could have some quite good fun. He is a very good actor. And he brings a star power, but at the same time, Star Wars over the years, I think it's proved it's not about the star power, it's about the story. And if you don't get the story right, the fans will turn on you. So yeah, if it was a perfect role for him, go for it. But I wouldn't force the issue.
Indeed. And even when you do get this all right, the fans will turn you as well. There's no pleasing some people. Moving on from one filmmaker to another, Rian Johnson, obviously the filmmaker behind Star Wars The Last Jedi. He's, of course, doing the Knives Out franchise over at Netflix now. You speak to the Independent, sort of. He's talking about a lot of things, but there's sort of the mention of Star Wars, and he did talk about sort of the war between fans. obviously, as a he's a bit older than me, but I think he was in his 20s when when the prequel trilogy come out, and as we know, you could see the older generation like pissed on it and hated it, and nearly drove Jake Lloyd nuts, and nearly drove Ahmed Best to suicide, as well as other things. And then obviously, as that children generation that watched those have grown up, they're now celebrated a lot more. And I think as some of those older fans who were so harsh on it have settled down and mellowed, they have accepted it more. You did sort of say, if you don't want to look at Star Wars in the parallels of World Wars, when the prequels came out, it was like World War One. Then when the sequels come out, it was like World War Two, which I think is a very sort of a cool way of looking at it. He's not saying that it's as bad as a World War or anything like that. I mean, he's just saying that if you want in terms of like, we had this big thing that happened, new movies came out and it caused a massive divide, and then the same thing happened again when the next set of movies came out. But he also did add that, he had such a wonderful, lovely, positive experience with the fans during the course of it. It's left him a bigger Star Wars fan than he was. Which is crazy because he says he grew up with it as the bedrock of his childhood. What he has said is that basically, if he gets to make another Star Wars, he'll be the happiest person. Don't know if you remember, he was announced for like a Star Wars trilogy, probably 10 years ago now. I mean, maybe not quite 10, but we're getting there. Trilogy movies. Obviously, The Last Jedi, regardless what people think of it, it's the one film that went through production with no problems at all. Didn't need rewrites, didn't need reshoots, really. Bob Iger and Kathleen Kennedy were really happy with the movie. Obviously, I think that came after. But it wasn't like Solo where we're firing directors and shutting production down. It wasn't like the other films that are getting sort of going into, in development hell for forever on sixth writers and things like that. So I don't know what your thoughts are in the comments, and also like for me, I think I think once he gets finished with Knives Out, and this is the big thing, is that if he wasn't doing Knives Out, I think we would have maybe heard one way or the other, like either A, he's not doing Star Wars, or B, he is. But because he's so busy with this Knives Out, it's a universe, I suppose. That's just spreading. Everyone loves it. He is a busy man with his own, Knives Out. He owns it. He created it, and he's very much producing that and making that. Just take us through your thoughts on that, please, Jace.
Right, for me, I've always said this, that I love The Last Jedi. I know it didn't sit easy with a lot of people, especially with what they did with Luke Skywalker. For me, I thought it was great because it took us down a path that we really didn't expect. But it was still, I feel, Star Wars, and it stuck. I think it followed on from The Force Awakens. I loved. There's some really cool bits in it, but I always said, and I think most people will agree, Force Awakens was pretty much a remake of New Hope, and went down a similar path. It wasn't. It was the Star Wars we loved, but it wasn't something new. The Last Jedi was something new, and I liked that. And I thought Rian Johnson did a brilliant job with that. And I was looking forward to his trilogy purely because I wanted him to do his own thing. I think for me, what went wrong with the sequels wasn't that they were bad films. The problem was there wasn't a clarity. No one with the originals and the prequels, George Lucas guided it. He was the force. What I think happened with the sequels is they fell apart because there was too many people chucking ideas in, and no one was taking control and saying the story's going to go from here to here, and this is how we're going to do it. Everyone was allowed to do their little thing, and it didn't work. Simple as, I think there was a lot of good things in them that could have been handled better. And I think if Rian Johnson had the chance to do his own trilogy, tell his own story from A to B to C, I think that'd be perfect. And I would, you know, he's already shown with The Last Jedi that he can do Star Wars. So I'd love to see him get the opportunity and maybe make right. You know, as I say, I do not blame him for what happened. I think it was a management issue of the storyline, and it fell apart because of that. And the directors did the best that they could do with the situation they were in. So for me, you know, Ryan Johnson, he's proved with his Nose Out series that he can run a series. He's got his ideas. He's a creator, and I think that is the thing. If he was given the chance to create something in the Star Wars universe, I think he'd do quite a good job.
Definitely, I think I think he's shown what he can do with established characters. I think he's wrote with Luke, he's wrote with Ray, Finn, Poe. So I think if he was to sort of go back and work on a Star Wars project with established characters, I think that would be great. But as we've seen with Knives Out, he's created his own characters here. Benoit Blanc, the iconic detective of the Knives Out universe, and the other characters interacted there, are all sort of ridiculously awesome. So for me, I think if it's a trilogy, give us it. If it's a one movie, give us it. I don't mind. And again, if it's all new, give us it. Or if he's going to go and revisit some areas, give us it as well. I would say that Last Jedi doesn't really depart from anything The Force Awakens did. It just carries on. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
And I think we do have to remember. I think it's a bit unfair to judge because Episode 9 was never called The Rise of Skywalker, and it had a completely different script. Obviously, Carrie Fisher's passing and maybe other things behind the scenes with Colin Trevorrow led to sort of an absolute reshuffle of craziness. So, I think I say this all the time. I said at my wedding day, like time waits for no person, time doesn't discriminate, and like death will come for you at any time. That's why you should live your life to the fullest. Carrie Fisher did live her life to the fullest, but sadly, death did come for her, and that left a production needing change by the seams of it. And that was maybe one part of it. We'll get a book down the line that tells us sort of why. But I believe it was called Duel of the Fates. I believe episode 9 originally, directed by Colin Trevorrow. Moving on from that, we're going to move on to Andor. So there's been quite a few things happening in Andor. Tony Gilroy sort of talking about why he sort of resisted the urge to bring Jyn Erso back. Essentially, he got asked about it and he said, no. I was asked that several times. I tried to sketch some versions along the way of what we would do. Episode 12 is very unique in its own energy, and we are not trying to hype anything in 12. We always knew it was going to be low energy, but a different kind of episode. Yeah, he said, I couldn't think of a way to get anything else from Rogue One, really. What's your thoughts? Would you like to see Jyn Erso in the Andor series in any way or form? Obviously, Felicity Jones is a fantastic actress, but for me, I think it didn't need it. This was all about Andor and sort of his journey, and I think he meets Jyn in the next chapter of Andor, which is Rogue One itself. Do you know what I mean? It almost is. So I think if you're gonna visit Jyn Erso, you probably need to do a Jyn Erso series where you see how she got dumped by Saw Gerrera and how she became to be imprisoned on that mining colony. But take it away, Jace, your thoughts on that?
yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I don't think there was any need for Jyn in the Andor series. Her story is told in Rogue One. As you say, if they wanted to expand it, it would be a separate series to Andor because their paths hadn't crossed and they didn't need to. I think the way Andor was managed was brilliant, and the the fact that they didn't you know, they could have put Tarkin in. They could have done a bit of Vader. They could have done so much, but the story, they kept it tight, and they kept it, focused on where it was going, without needing to pander to fandom. So I think Tony Gilroy did a brilliant job. Maybe that is a suggestion. They now need to do a Jyn Erso story. Um, Maybe that would be quite, a way to see, because obviously she's quite an interesting character when we meet her at the beginning of Rogue One. She's been through a lot. She's lost her parents. She's been brought up by, this don't know what to describe Saw as. He's not a nutcase, but he's certainly not completely balanced.
And I think on
So
that point as well, I think if you look at that point, sort of obviously Saw takes her in as a youngster, and obviously Saw's not always a nutcase, right? Saw deteriorates through time and through experience and through grief.
yeah,
So so she probably grows up seeing him start to deteriorate, which is like probably very emotional and traumatic. So from this
yeah,
man who saved you to then this man who it looks like he maybe leaves her. When the last year, there's a great book called Rebel Rising. It's a Jyn Erso story. It's like a YA book, which is really cool, and it fills in some of the backstory of like Jyn, sort of working with Saw as sort of a teenager and a bit older, and things like that. I think
yeah.
also
So
with the series as well. Think about screen time. We had 12 episodes. It was 3 episodes every week for 4 weeks. And I think Mon Mothma got the right amount of screen time. Luthen got the right amount of screen time. Cassian got the right amount of screen time. On the Imperial side, I feel that Deidre got the right amount of screen time, but other minor characters got the right amount of screen time. The likes of like
that's
Luthen's
gas.
Accomplices, like other rebel people like Saw Gerrera, for example, got the right amount of screen time. On the Imperial side, Deidre's boyfriend, right amount of screen time. People on the ISB, Krennic, the right amount of screen time. If you just went to put Jyn in there, she's probably just in there for like a last shot look at Jyn. And I just think it didn't need it. I think if you're going to put her in, you have to put her in substantially. And I think if you put her in substantially, it changes the show doubles in size, maybe. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I think they stuck to it tightly. They used the characters that they needed to tell the story, and they focused on characters that we'd met, but we wanted to know more about. So yeah, I really don't think it was necessary. So I think they've done a brilliant job with Andor, and Tony Gilroy. Be interesting to see if he ever returns to the Star Wars universe.
Indeed. I think it'll be a while if he does. I think probably needs a palate cleanser after that. And I know there's a lot of people like Tony Gilroy, and he did do a great job, but like Diego Luna was executive producer, and he drove a lot of this as well. Kathleen Kennedy drove a lot of it. Like there's other people involved as well. I think to just be like give him a show to do whatever he wants type of thing. A lot of the stuff in the other characters brought in, I imagine, was the story group saying these are the people who would probably fit in and it would work well. Andor season 2 Emmy submissions has been revealed that's going to be in 23 categories, including directing, writing, and for 4 guest stars. So let's just have a quick run through. So it looks like for writing, what Dan Gilroy, obviously Tony's brother, has been nominated. Diego Luna has been nominated. That is what you would think. Stellan Skarsgård and Kyle Soller, Denise Gough, Adria Arjona, Faye Morrissey, Elizabeth DeLusso, sort of, and obviously Genevieve O'Reilly. So all of our sort of minor characters we're talking about who sort of had smaller roles compared to casting, but still big chunks of like awesome work in this show, all nominated. And then I think Ben Mendelsohn's been nominated for guest stars along with Forrest Whitaker. And obviously newcomer Benjamin Bratt as well, among others. Speaking of, so it's been nominated for, like I said, 23, put forward for submission, for 23 categories. We'll see how many it ends up getting nominated for. And then also in the UK, it's up for National Television Awards here in the UK, the NTAs. You can actually vote for that now. Voting closes on the 30th, Friday, May the 30th at 11 p.m. British Summer Time. And it's up for Best Returning Drama. And then in a strange one, looks like the NTAs just has one category for drama performance, and it includes male, females, and others, I'd imagine. So Diego Luna and Genevieve O'Reilly are both up in that category, but you can only vote for one of them. So yep. So Andor for returning drama, and then Diego for Cassian and Genevieve for Mon are both up for drama performance. And I think the awards take place on the September 10th, so still a while to go, to be fair, for that one, taking place at the O2 in London. What's your thoughts on the Emmys and the NTAs for Andor? Obviously, I think very much deserved, to show that, it's well written, the character development's fantastic, the technical side of it is fantastic as well. It's just all round like a state-of-the-art show, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd hope that it gets some sort of recognition. Obviously, the problem is it's going to be up against so many different shows, and obviously, Star Wars. Although there's a huge fandom when it comes to television, it's a bit of a niche market. But good luck to everyone, and I'd love to see them get some sort of recognition because I think they deserve it and they need it.
Definitely. Moving on from that, you mentioned Tarkin before, and the reason why I think Tarkin wasn't in this series at all, only named, was because of, obviously, there's a dispute between his family and Disney, I think, over his use of his likeness in Rogue One. SAG-AFTRA, which is obviously the Actors Guild of America, has filed unfair labour practice over the use of Darth Vader's voice in Fortnite. So if anyone plays Fortnite, obviously at the minute it's like huge Star Wars month. I think it's got one more week to go. And part of that was there's a Darth Vader in the game, which is really awesome. I played it, but there was also part where I think if you acquire him, you can like talk to him, he'll talk back to you, and it's obviously AI generated. Now, from what I can gather, I think James Earl Jones' family have said like it's fine, but Llama Productions failed to notify the Labour group and negotiate when it began employing the James Earl Jones AI voice in Fortnite. So the voice has been pulled from the game, I believe. The character's still in there, but again, it goes show up with AI and deepfakes and even just using somebody's likeness when they're no longer here. It's just messy. Even like this family in a state of looks like I've sort of agreed to this, but then again, as we know, like if you have to go through the agencies and the labor groups in America, like when you were dealing with entertainment sectors. So what's your thoughts on the messiness of this? And like, I'm sort of glad that it is getting pulled up on, and like, because I think if something hasn't been done correctly, then yeah, like it needs to be done and signed off by all parties, I suppose.
Yeah, it is something that I think we're going to see over the next few years. Obviously, as technology's advanced and there's been new things, it needs to be carefully policed because obviously, once an actor's passed away, someone needs to be keeping an eye on making sure that their legacy isn't abused. Obviously, I know with the James Earl Jones case, it's a little bit complicated because he actually signed the documents himself before he passed away. There was an agreement in place, which I'm sure there was probably a financial agreement that he probably set up to protect his family once he'd gone. And why shouldn't he have the right to do that? So, yeah, I completely. It needs to be carefully checked because obviously the last thing you want then is an actor to pass away, um, and their image, their voice, or whatever just be used willy nilly without their consent and abused, because that would abuse their legacy. So, this is very much, I think, a test case with everything to make sure that everything's in place so that there is nothing in the future where people do have their legacy tarnished. So I think it's important that these sort of cases are brought up um, just to protect that.
Definitely, yeah. And I think the tricky thing is that, like, just because you've sort of did some work and signed it off so that it can be used sort of artificially, doesn't mean it can be used artificially for anything. And I think
Yeah,
that's where that has to go through sort of a family sign off, which maybe has here, but also like through the correct unions and stuff. Um, Move on to a bit of sad news. So, Welsh production designer and art director Les Dilly, he won Academy Awards for Best Art Direction for Star Wars in 1977 and Raiders of the Lost Ark in 1981. And he's passed away at age 84 with complications for Alzheimer's. So, just want to send our thoughts um, to his friends and family and colleagues who worked with him over the years, and just say thank you. I think when you think about that group of people who sort of worked in Lucasfilm in ILM and all of that, especially in the 70s and into the 80s, that sort of brought us Star Wars, but also changed film forever for the better. These were pioneers. Like I said, he's best known for his work on the immortal Lucasfilm franchise, Star Wars and Indiana Jones. He received Oscars for Best Art Direction for both of those movies. Um, He also received Academy nominations for his production designs on The Abyss and The Empire Strikes Back and Alien. His other notable credits include Superman, An American Werewolf in London, Never Say Never Again, Legend, The Exorcist 3, Casper, Deep Impact, and Inspector Gadget. So, again, just to not only just working on sort of those early movies in Lucasfilm and ILM's infancy that changed cinema, but also, a huge amount of fantastic movies there. Moving on from that, something a bit more fun. We have Natalie Portman. She's been talking again. Reveals that she did, in fact, steal a Star Wars prop from set. This was on this morning here in the UK, actually. So, what is she saying is that she did actually take one of Anakin's braids from set. She did say she no longer has it, but she did steal one of Anakin's braids from the set. When you think about things on set, you'd probably want a lightsaber and things like that, but I think you're probably not going to be able to steal Hayden Christensen's lightsaber because he's probably going to steal that himself. If that makes sense. And they're probably counting the lightsabers and hand them back in as well. But I suppose a braid would be a nice thing to steal. I thought she maybe would have stole like one of the Chapor snippets, like some of the jewelry pieces that the Queen and Senator of Naboo wore, which were all awesome. But I suppose it leads to my question to you, Jace, is if you were on a Star Wars set and you could steal something, what would you steal?
Oh, do you know what? I'd probably steal Chewie's bowcaster
That's a big bit
because
of
I
kit.
think
You better
that's
have a big bag.
yeah. But it'd be really cool to have it on the wall. Um, but yeah, if you're gonna go for something good, you might as well go for something big and impressive, aren't you?
Possibly. I think so. I think so. I don't know what I would take. Maybe, we'd all want the lightsaber, but I think apart from that, maybe something that they wouldn't notice, like steal like a button out of the control set of the Millennium Falcon or something like that. That like they're not going to find it later that you've took it. That would be pretty cool. Or costume wise, if you could steal your entire costume, that would be really, really awesome. What's your thoughts on Natalie Portman? She's obviously talking a lot about all of our projects that she's got coming out, but as usual, comes back to Star Wars. As you know, she's spoken recently about she was willing to return and waiting for that phone call. But he has just added a bit more fun to it, talking about how she got on Anakin's braid. Sort of, just take us through your thoughts on Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I think Natalie Portman, obviously, she holds a special part in every Star Wars fan's heart. She's the mother of Luke Skywalker and Princess Leia. And, would love to see her rejoin the story at some point in some way. But obviously, it's got to be done properly. Um, all of the Star Wars actors at the moment seem to want to be getting back in on the action. They're all, voicing "Let us in, let us in." So Disney and Lucasfilm have got a huge pot to choose from. But obviously, all of these actors come with a paycheck, and it's whether that and the right thing can come into play. I'm still holding out for a Mace Windu series, but um, as the years go by, it's starting to definitely look like that's not going to happen. But you never know. They've surprised us over and over again with Star Wars. Who would have believed, 15, 20 years ago that we were even going to see a new trilogy? So let's see what happens.
Indeed. And speaking of time, obviously it's 10 years since The Force Awakens came out this year. Crazy, eh? And Star Wars The Force Awakens will be in concert at the Royal Albert Hall on November 15th, 2025. So I think tickets are on sale now for that. Obviously, you get to experience Star Wars The Force Awakens in concert with the whole John Williams score performed live by the Royal Philharmonic Concert Orchestra, and it's conducted by Ludwig Wicki. And yeah, you get to experience the movie that's a decade old with a fantastic orchestra. There's priority booking for friends and patrons of Royal Albert Hall on May 22nd. So that's already on sale. And general sales from May 23rd. So that's on sale now as well. You can just go to royalalberthall.com. I've never done like a movie with an orchestra before, and I love I love all music, and I love music in the movies. And being a Star Wars fan, from a child, hearing that John Williams score, but I've never heard it. I've heard it played by an orchestra, but I've never heard it played by an orchestra while the movie's on a big screen. I don't know if you have, Jason, what your thoughts are on it.
No, and I'd love to see that because um, I've always loved to see a good film or hear a good film score. The nearest I've ever got to is Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds live on stage, and that was absolutely amazing. So to actually see a film with the orchestra, I think, that'd definitely be one on the bucket list.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like I said, I've heard Star Wars played by local orchestras. I've heard John Williams conduct some Star Wars at Star Wars Celebration Orlando when he came on stage unannounced with a full orchestra. When he sort of did Leia's theme in tribute to Carrie, and then he played a few other themes as well. So I've got to see the Maestro himself play it, which was fantastic and memories that'll be with me forever. I know John does play the Hollywood Bowl sometimes. I'm not sure if he does at his age now, but I know in the last decade he has probably every summer played the Hollywood Bowl and played hits from all his movies, including Jurassic Park and Superman and all of that, as well as Star Wars. But I think this will be a cool experience to watch the movie again, but also you get a full live orchestra and you get to appreciate all the hard work that goes into that side of it. If it wasn't so far away, I'd probably say definitely yes. But we will see. Watch this space. That brings an end to sort of all the news topics I had, Jason. I don't know if you've got any Star Wars news you want to talk about.
No, obviously I'm gearing up ready for next weekend, June the 7th, heading to Fording Bridge for the Andor event, which is really is sold out. I have just looked, and it looks like there's going to be some more tickets made available soon. At I think they're very basic tickets. All of the stuff with the goodies has sold out already, but there's a new set of tickets. Uncle Harlow Will Know What's Best, which are priced at £25, and that's just for entry. So whereas the previous Kriegel Lives and Nemo's all inclusive, with Kriegel Lives you got the entry and an Andmore logo pin. With the Nemo's all inclusive VIP, you get the entry, the Andmore logo pin, a Crest logo pin, and an A2 poster, plus reserved seating within front 2 rows, and the option to purchase lots and lots of merchandise, which is gradually dropping at the moment. At the current merchandise that we've got up for grabs is baseball cap, a limited edition Lego Ferrex Time Grappler, which looks really cool, and a limited edition Lego B2 Emo, which also looks cool. We got the Andor pin, the crest, and the Andmore poster, which are all looking really, really cool. I'm really looking forward to it. They've got some awesome guests, and they did announce earlier this week, I think it was May the 25th, that they've got a special free guests. So you've got TJ Falls, Mohen Leo, and Marcus Dryden, who are all, you've got visual effects producer, visual effects supervisor, and visual effects on-set supervisor, and they're coming along just to do a talk about the visual effects and everything. So that looks really good. I'm looking forward to finding out more about behind the scenes and meeting up with quite a few people I know that also love Star Wars at the same time. So I think that's going to be really cool. I'm hoping next week or this weekend, I'm going to try and head to Jedi Archives, the new shop in Dorchester that's opened, to have a look round and hopefully do some more plotting for Dorchester Strikes Back. So, yeah, I'm delving into Star Wars at the moment again. And I've had a rather cool piece of Roosevelt's goodies turn up last weekend. I've now got a Rebels shirt, which is done, I suppose it's pop art style, but I've actually got a shirt with Hondo's face on it now, so I'm quite happy with that. And I also got a really cool Yoda baseball cap, which I'm wearing at work at the moment. So there's lots of Star Wars goodies that I've been delving into. And I'm looking forward to, obviously, we're heading into the next reveal of the Star Wars Unlimited, which looks really, really cool. And I'm trying to remember what the next one's called. It's jumped my mind again. I think it's Powers of the Force, if I remember rightly. Well, it is very much Force related. So I'm looking forward to when that all releases, because I've really enjoyed the Jump to Light Speed stuff that's come out over the last few months.
Nice. So there'll be plenty of Jedi and Sith cards then coming our way in that new upgrade.
Yes, I believe there is. So that's what I'm really looking forward to. And I've just seen as well that the next lot after that looks like there's going to be a few more droids in it, because I believe there's even going to be a chopper card coming out soon. So that'll be one I'll be trying to hunt down.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Any closing shots before I wrap this thing up, Jace?
No, I think just carry on enjoying Star Wars as I am, and look forward to all the different stuff that we got coming through.
Spot on. So if you're around Dorchester in the next week, keep an eye out for Jace at Jedi Archives doing a Star Wars shopping, getting his blue milk in from the fridge. And of course, if you are at Andor, definitely keep an eye out for Jace. If you see him, definitely give him a high five and tell him some Star Wars secrets. He loves talking Star Wars, so you will deep dive that with everybody. Jace, where can people find you on social media?
It's at Hondoling, as always.
Yep, and you can find myself on Instagram and on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can also find the podcast on X at Boardstar, and you also find the podcast everywhere else, including Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, you name it, at Star Wars Podcast. You can also find all that link in our show notes, as well as a link to our Patreon. If you want to support the show, you can become a Patreon member. I should be recording a Patreon episode this weekend, hopefully, Patreon exclusive for those who are Patreon members. And we're going to have comedian Luke Milford is going to be interviewing me all about Star Wars, which will be quite cool. That brings an end to the episode. If you're listening on Apple Music or on Spotify, I suppose Apple Podcasts now, Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave us a 5-star review, a lovely sentence. It keeps us smiling all week and only takes you a few moments. And again, if you are listening on any of the other wonderful podcast applications out there is quite a lot now, and it has the feature to leave a review.